As Judy said, it's really a pleasure to have everyone here because this was kind of Ralph and Pat's second home at UCLA. And once you're in here, you can't even tell it's raining outside. We got to know the two of them through Medical Classics, a monthly series of Tuesday evening history of medicine lectures in a format of mingling, lecture, mingling over wine and nuts, and a related display of rare books from our collections, then dinner with the speaker at the faculty center, then Q&A, then home. Ralph gave one of the early lectures, in fact, in 1987 on his heroes, Murray and Muybridge. And Kathy Donahue, who was the former head of this division, that was Ralph. She did her first reference questions at UCLA with Ralph, and this was her first Medical Classics that she went to. So it really set a great impression. It's also when I noticed not just how attractive the two of them are, or were, but what a most impressive chin Ralph had. But that's an aside. It was at these gabbing and dining sessions that I got to know the couple, almost joined at the hip with one name, Ralph and Pat, and learned how interesting and fun it was to hang out with them and their overlapping conversation. I learned some of Ralph's lexicon, favorite words like whack, as in, oh, my wrist has been all out of whack. Any idea where I could get some? Or unusual words which grabbed him. It's fitting that the last entry on their word-a-day calendar on the kitchen table was this one, fuffle, because Ralph was so fond of its relative kerfuffle and other such mishigas. It's also how I started to learn of Ralph's obsession with collecting portrait and commemorative medals of scientists, physicians, organizations, conferences, discoveries, and inventions. Take this one, for example, a Chinese medal which stunningly pays tribute to the healthcare workers who battled the deadly SARS respiratory virus. Now, it really shows what a medal is. It's something meant to be fascinating, that fits in one's hand, that can be passed from one person to another, given as a award or as a memento. It often is made of a material that will last through the ages, but it's based on a transitory, sometimes a very idea, sometimes, or very intimate encounter. Pat, of course, made sure that you knew that she was the one who launched her husband into his decades-long collecting passion. While Ralph was doing research for the Office of Naval Research in England in 1971 to 72, Pat found an old medal of the natural philosopher and chemist Joseph Priestley at a London flea market and suggested that Ralph might enjoy collecting such things. Ever the scientific investigator, Ralph started with no knowledge but inquired of dealers and learned from a professor of physiology who had a collection and met other collectors and took an initial spark and grew it from there. Speaking of out of whack earlier, the vintage early 1980s pre-mouse database, which tracks Ralph's medals, was perpetually in that state. The number of times that darn software acted up and threw the database into a kerfuffle, and Ralph with it, is too large to count. I think that he would have enjoyed the irony of a recent acquisition from eBay. A bronze medal from 1986 depicting a floppy disk. It's unusable, made out of solid bronze, and it's a floppy disk. Something that perhaps some of you folks, younger folks, may never have had to deal with. The joy of using. Now, if any of you younger Sun and Shines feel the collecting bug, I can tell you who to blame. Start with your great-grandparents or great-great-grandparents, such as Dr. Robert Sun and Shine, a physician and book collector who donated many of his books to libraries in Chicago. Then move on to his son, Ralph, the man with the famously large chin and even larger heart, who also collected books and who helped organizations and institutions get medals made, as long as he could have a copy, and who himself became the subject of two strikingly handsome commemorative works, one by his son David, the other by the artist Alex Shagan. Generosity and kindness were written all over Ralph and Pat, but so was business sense. They saw that the UCLA Biomed Library could be a suitable permanent home for their beloved treasures, as a place that would use them in exhibits and introduce them in person and online to researchers as a new source of portraiture and images in medicine and science, and continue to build the collection with their kind of appreciation and commitment and enthusiasm. You're going to see an exhibit around you today which is just a drop in the bucket from the more than 2,200 item collection, and that we're continuing to build. I can honestly tell the younger family members that as this collection resides forever at UCLA, or as long as California is attached to the continent, you can always point to your ancestors and, like us curators, take great honor and pride in their scholarship, thoughtfulness, and philanthropy. Now, people who are not hunter, gatherer, shopper, collectors like Ralph and Pat might look at the medals and exclaim, wow, think of how much they spent on this stuff. What if they'd spent it on other things? Well, then Ralph and Pat would not have been the passionate, interesting, engaging people we knew. Because of the collecting, anywhere they traveled in the world, they had friends with whom to visit, swap medals, compare notes, and bring back happy and interesting stories. They were popular, sought-after table mates at the international medal meetings and on cruises and at medical classics because they were curious, or had curious minds, and amassed experiences and were into living and sharing their stories and adventures. As American Express reminds us, all this is priceless. Finally, I used to throw an annual New Year's Day party with a whole bunch of people coming through the house. And Ralph and Pat made a couple of appearances a decade ago and charmed my other friends, of course. What I most remember, though, is that among the tubs of Sam Adams and Sierra Nevada and Heineken and bottles of wine and champagne, there was Pat by the refrigerator holding court with a tall Budweiser in her hand. It's what I like, she laughed. And so, in closing, I raise a double-fisted toast that we love them, we miss them, but they had the foresight to make sure that we won't forget them. So good for them and good for us. And cheers, l'chaim, salute, and skol.